The Cardinals played one of the least compelling games of their season on Tuesday night, as Sonny Gray described maybe having some trouble with the St. Louis Heat. Not sure what the Bats had trouble with, as they couldn't solve Sandy Alcantara. We'll talk about the game and, of course, the backdrop with the trade deadline fast approaching, all coming up on b-schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Tuesday evening, July 29th, 2025. Just got home from Busch Stadium covering the Cardinals' 5-0 loss to the Marlins. I think my tweet after the game from the press box put it just about as good as I could say it, which is, looking at my tweet now, of all the baseball games, that was certainly one of them. It's about all I have to say about that game, but we'll find a way to put a whole podcast together anyway. We'll hear from Sonny Gray during this podcast. That's what we're going to do, because he had some commentary postgame about him struggling in the St. Louis Heat. And I think it's something that's kind of interesting when you look back over the course of his career. It's even something that Ollie Marmol kind of made a note of during his postgame time at the podium when he was asked, I think I asked him about what he saw from Sonny tonight. The notion that Sonny has maybe not performed as well in the month of July historically in his career. And the numbers actually back that up. And maybe we get a bit of an explanation for the reason. I can't recall, the extent to which this has been a topic of conversation revolving around Sonny Gray before, but he kind of offered it up tonight, talking about struggling to grip the baseball. And it actually came as a response to a question about an increase to his changeup usage and whether that was something to do with some of the different things he's been kind of vague about, working on some things behind the scenes, elements of his approach, whatever the case may be. But like I said, vague, he doesn't really want to divulge a lot of the details as to what he has been working on in recent weeks, but was asked if, the changeup stuff was maybe part of that. And he said, no, that was not the explanation behind maybe going to his changeup a little more often. So we'll let you hear from Sonny Gray as to the reasoning behind that, which gets into the conversation of kind of how he is dealing with the St. Louis Heat. The home run that he gave up to Graham Pauley in the second inning was on a curveball. It was a pitch that was down below the strike zone, and one that Sonny said after the game, was not a pitch that he really had a problem with, thought it was a good pitch. And the radio broadcast, as I was making my way into Busch Stadium, had said the same when that happened live. So it was a pitch down and into a lefty. Anytime you have breaking stuff, maybe down and into a lefty, sweeping across from the right-handed arm angle, that's maybe a pitch that he executed pretty well, but you wonder if that's the right location to be coming into a lefty, where sometimes that is just the wheelhouse. They can drop the bat head on it, and when it's that curveball sort of coming across their field of vision, they get maybe a little bit more time to react to it. Watching back, he really did put it in a pretty good location down below the zone. It's just one of those deals where, I'm not sure if that was just a spot that Graham Pauley, the 9-hole hitter for the Marlins, so you're not talking about a typical home run hitter, was just able to kind of drop the bat head on it and drive it out into the Cardinal bullpen. But overall, Sonny was, it was okay. 5 innings. He does give up the 3 runs, 2 of which come on that home run by Pauley there in the second inning. But the Cardinals, they don't score any runs tonight. They only collect 4 total hits in the game. They made Sandy Alcantara look like a Cy Young Award candidate, which, of course, he's a former winner of that award, but that almost feels like a former life for Sandy Alcantara at this point in time, given the struggles that he has had in 2025. He came in with a 6.66 ERA, and after 5 shutout innings, dropped that down to 6.36. St. Charles County represent. 3 hits allowed, 3 walks are allowed. He hit the first batter that he faced of the game in Mason Wynn, I believe on the first pitch of the game. Got away from him and got Mason Wynn there on the back. So not perfect command from Sandy Alcantara, but the Cardinals just couldn't do anything against him. And that's, again, the characterization that I know anytime I hear it brought up, and it's in the presence of a manager, a guy like Oliver Marmol, is going to push back and say, this notion that that our guys have they're going to quit, or that they, weren't giving their 100% effort, is something that they'll always take exception to. But if you're watching it as a fan, you're watching it from the outside looking in, you look at some of these types of games and go, man, what what about the rhythm of this game offensively gave you some confidence? Like there just was not. I was trying to sit there as Ollie was. We were waiting in the interview room for Ollie. I'm thinking, all right, about the offense. What is something that I would even look to ask about? Like, what is there to ask at this point when it comes to a game like that offensively? It just was bad. It just, it has the feeling of guys knowing that it's a trade deadline and the team's going to look different, come this time next week. And trying to deal with that and try to play a baseball game through that. You like to say, oh, the trade deadline doesn't bother us. We're aware of it in the backdrop of everything that's going on, but it's not something that impacts our day-to-day. I don't know, man. Like, it would be human nature for guys to be a little tense right now and on the edge of their seats, just kind of not really knowing what's to come. And against a right-hander who, again, we know has a really good track record, but Sandy has not been the same guy this year. And so to let him go 5 shutout innings when he came in with an ERA closer to 7 than it was closer to being a Cy Young candidate, you do look at that one a little bit sideways. This was not a performance for the Cardinal offense that you feel great about. And look, I think at this point, this is not a team that can afford to hold on to its pieces with the thought being that they can contend and make the playoffs this year. If they make the playoffs, great. It has to be without some of these guys, at least from their bullpen, like Ryan Helsley, Phil Maton. They've got to go. They've got to be moved for the value that they can get for these guys before July 31, which is obviously fast approaching. You're listening to this on Wednesday, more likely than not, so tomorrow would be the deadline. Steven Matz, speaking of trade deadline, we maybe thought we were on a hug watch there for a minute tonight with Steven Matz as the broadcast picked up on it. Some of us up at the press box were trying to figure out what the heck was going on and whether we had missed something of substance. But Steven Matz pitched the 6th inning, and this was the second day of a back-to-back for him. So Sonny goes 5, gave up the 3 runs, 8 hits, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts for Sonny Gray. Matz comes in, a little bit of rough going there, gives up a couple of runs in the 6th inning, but throws 25 pitches, and again on a back-to-back where he had already thrown last night. He's out there again for an inning tonight. 24 pitches tonight, mostly strikes from him, but gave up the couple of runs. And then the 7th inning, the top of the 7th is due to begin after the Cardinals complete their at-bats in the bottom of the 6th, and there's no pitcher out there. And we're trying to figure out, was Matz out there and never came out? But it was something that the broadcast brought up. I don't believe Steven Matz ever went out there, and I don't think Oliver Marmol ever intended him to. But, of course, with the trade deadline looming and Matz being a guy that's on an expiring contract in his final year of a 4-year deal, his is a name that you could certainly see floated around out there. At the end of it, I think it was a simple miscommunication. That is the way that Oliver Marmol described it after the game, saying, it was a matter of who they needed to have ready and just a miscommunication between the dugout and the bullpen on what they were planning to do there, which was, I assume, have Matt Swanson, throw the next inning, but just that they hadn't called down. Now, it was brought up to me on Twitter, and, I don't disagree with it. If you want to put on the conspiratorial hat, you could say that's not really something that seems like Oliver Marmol would mess up. Like, what would the circumstance be that he would mess that up, So if you wanted to be, a little bit, is Steven Matz on the Cardinals? Yeah, as of this recording, he's on the Cardinals. He wasn't traded during the game. There was nothing that they mentioned post-game. But is there a realm in which they could have thought to throw him a second inning, and then there's the call comes in that says, hey, we might look to just throw him for 1 inning tonight, because you never do know. I don't know. It seems if it's a coincidence, it's a really interesting one for sure. It's fun to kind of speculate about this stuff. If they are, talking behind the scenes about Steven Matz with other teams, Ollie Marmol is certainly not going to tell you that or tell us that. And so you understand his position there. But if you just kind of chalk it up to a miscommunication, he wore a good poker face if it was any more than that in the way that he described it post-game. So knew he was going to be asked about it, was ready with an answer, and, we'll see if anything comes of it. Would it be possible that Mozeliak calls down and says, hey, wait a minute, we haven't traded him, but let's keep him as fresh as we can here just in case, if we get something across the finish line. I have no idea. I don't know if there would be any veracity to that whatsoever, but it could be kind of fun. What if we don't have fun during this trade deadline period, what do we have to lean back on is what I say. So let your imagination run wild, I suppose. with that one. But by all accounts, that was just one of those things, as they say in the business, where Steven Matz was not designed to pitch the second inning. And for whatever reason, they didn't have a pitcher on the field. It wasn't that Matz was out there and then they pulled him off the field. It was they didn't have one, and the infielders were kind of tossing the ball around, but there was no pitcher out there. And then Matt Swanson, kind of in a hurry, in earnest, gets up and he gets out there despite not having been warmed up. So, I don't know. It definitely seems a little bit weird, but, like, time will tell, right? Like, if he's traded, then you can look back at that and say, oh, maybe there was a little bit more to that, and they, maybe initially thought Matz could throw another inning, but they thought better of it, or whatever the case. But like I said, if it was anything more than what meets the eye, Ollie Marmol had a very good poker face in the way that he described that postgame. So we move on, though. I want to get into the Sonny Gray stuff because I teased it. I teased it off the top, which I feel a little bit bad that I'm now just getting to it 11 minutes into the show. But lengthy kind of back and forth. I believe Jim the Cat Hayes asked him the question that we're going to hear first when it comes to the increased usage for Sonny and that changeup. And I don't know offhand the number of times that he used it. I suppose it wouldn't take me all too terribly long to look it up on StatCast. But as we know from the recent outings where Sonny Gray has not been performing quite as well of late, he had kind of said after his last start that he's kind of working through some things, trying some stuff out, and he's never been somebody that would shy away from trying out certain things. That was sort of the way that it was described by Sonny last time, handful of days ago or so. And it was kind of strange because you're like, well, we don't really know what he's talking about. We don't really know what's going on, and if it's something, substantive, or if it's just kind of Sonny being Sonny and the way that guys say, oh, I'm working through this, that, or the other, and they don't want to be particularly forthwith with that information. But in Sonny's case, usually he's pretty candid and will kind of tell you what's going on. I'm just scrolling through the data here on StatCast, and it looks like in each inning he had, 4 or 5 changeups that he threw pretty much every inning until he got to the 5th, and then it seemed like he stopped using it. Didn't throw it once in the 5th inning. And so perhaps maybe by the 5th inning he'd found something. It cooled down a little bit. He was able to avoid maybe some of the sweat situation. I don't know. It was a little bit still all over the place with the command in parts of that inning. But the sweat, the heat, and all of it seems to be something that was getting to Sonny Gray, and it's not something that he really had an issue with discussing. So here's the clip from after the Cardinals game in the post-game clubhouse with Sonny Gray. I'll find the question. Again, it was asked of Sonny Gray what the situation was with the idea that he was maybe tinkering with something and the changeup had something to do with it. I'll play for you the end of the previous answer where it was the first time unprompted that he mentions that he'd be looking for a little bit of cooler weather, and we'll kind of go from there.
Ready to get to some probably a little cooler weather, to be honest with you. It's tough.
You were mentioning last start that you were trying different things. Was one of them the way you use your changeup?
No, I threw that more tonight just because that's. Being honest, I'm struggling in the heat to grip anything. So then I threw the changeup early and was like, well, this kind of slips out anyway. So maybe this is something that I can just use. So tonight was one that was just kind of like one of those things where it's like, well, all right, let's see if we can use this a little bit. So no, that wasn't anything. That was just kind of, I think more or less of that was just something that I felt like I could throw and it'd be decent.
So how challenging is the St. Louis heat? Like
it's tough. It's tough. You're just wet. Everything's just wet. It's tough. It's very tough. Everyone's dealing with it, obviously. So it's not, it's not just like everyone is dealing with it. But it's tough. It's tough to grip anything. Everything's wet. Everything's wet. It is a real challenge and something that I've tried to overcome in the past years prior, just throughout my career. It's tough.
How many jerseys did you go through?
I don't know. I don't even know, to be honest with you. Yeah, it is tough. I mean, just gripping things in general. Everything is wet.
So I guess there's your candor from Sonny Gray, Cardinals starter after the game tonight. Everything's wet. That I think he said that phrase at least a handful of times. And look, I kind of went back and forth with somebody already this evening on Twitter after tweeting out some of the quote there from Sonny Gray talking about the gripping of the pitches and the changeup being, which I guess maybe makes sense with the changeup. It kind of, he said, slips out of your hand anyway, and so it doesn't really hinder the grip in the way that you throw it. And so he used it more. That was sort of the logic behind that. But I went back and forth with somebody who said, oh, I mean, it's just always guys making excuses. Sonny Gray's making an excuse. My thing with that is I don't love when I hear fans saying, oh, it's just an excuse, when it's a guy explaining something. And, you know, it may be explaining, the interpretation is like, well, he's explaining why he didn't do as well and, you know, making an excuse for his performance. That's truly not the perspective I take from it, and maybe that's just because it's like that, writer or reporter perspective versus a fan perspective. But when I hear that from Sonny Gray, it's like, okay, for sure, I can see that people might end up making more of a big deal out of something like that and trying to make more out of it than what it is. But I also feel like I would rather hear more from the player about their psyche or their thought process or what's going on than hear less from them, right? We always credit guys when they are candid, but then when they give us a little more, fans will say, well, you're making up excuses. And so then we see players shy away from being candid because they fear what they say could be misconstrued. And that's just kind of my 2 cents about it. Like, I feel like if people had Sonny, which it's not everybody's experience to be like standing in a locker with your phone out and recording what he's saying like I had tonight. But I feel like if you're sitting across the table from him at the bar or at the coffee shop, and he's like, yeah, it was really friggin' hard to grip the ball, and everything's wet, and it was this, and it was that, then you'd kind of relate to that more. You'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, that does sound kind of crazy. You might ask a follow-up, or you might be curious about the details of that. But it's like you see it on social media, or you see, you read it in an article, and it's, oh, this guy sucks, he's making excuses. I mean, 5 innings, 3 runs. He wasn't great tonight. Like I said, the 2-run homer was actually probably a pitch that he executed well. Maybe just wasn't the right pitch to be thrown in that spot. Who am I to tell Sonny or Pajes or whoever called for the pitch what to do in a given situation? They know more than me, but I do think that aspect of a lefty getting it in their wheelhouse, even if it is executed below the strike zone, it's just something that Graham Pauley seemed to be, if he wasn't looking for it, he was ready for it at the very least. And so, that contributes to his final line score not being quite as productive or shiny as it otherwise would have been. But I just think about the hand thing, and like for me, nobody cares about this. I am no professional athlete, but I am a bowler, and I do okay when it comes to bowling. But one thing that I definitely deal with is, and I'm talking about in an air-conditioned bowling alley, I pick up the bowling ball, and they have the air coming out. If you've ever been to a bowling alley that's got the air coming out right there by the ball return, where the bowling balls come back from after you throw it, it comes back. They've got the air there, and you might think, well, why is that? It's exactly for the reason that you put your hand over the air when you're bowling, more seriously or competitively, because you when you pick up the ball, you don't want it to slip out of your hands and have a situation like that. That's in an air-conditioned bowling alley, and I tell you, my whole life I have dealt with this, where my hand will sweat, and I'll have just like the pitcher on the mound has a rosin ball or bag that they can go to. Obviously, some changes, and certainly the question I would want to ask Sonny, but I know you probably wouldn't get a great answer on it, is this different than before when y'all could use the sticky stuff? And guys were very careful about they didn't want to own up to that they had used the sticky stuff when really everybody did it to try to get a better grip on the baseball, and then all those guys started getting hit by pitches, and we heard some pitchers speaking out about it, but then it kind of died down, and it's not as much of a topic anymore. But just be curious as far as like the regimen and the different things that he would try to do, because he said, you heard him say it's something that he's dealt with throughout his career that he's tried to get figured out. But certainly when you're in the St. Louis heat, the heat and the humidity, my goodness, if you're from St. Louis or have spent time there, you know what we're talking about. That's just something that he deals with. And so like we could go, well, he's making excuses. No, I mean, I think he's explaining an aspect of his performance that was central to what was going on. And I think the job as reporters or media when you go in there is to get that. And so the cat asked him the question, and then John Denton asked him to kind of expand upon that. You're getting the information that's like true. I don't doubt for a second that he's describing what he's actually dealing with and going through when he's starting. And it's not to have somebody pity him. Frankly, I don't think Sonny Gray really cares what the reaction is. He's been doing this for long enough that his style is to just kind of be candid and tell you what's going on, and you can take it or leave it. There will be times where he doesn't, and he won't divulge certain things, and that's his prerogative. But my stance is always like, would rather a player be more willing to open up about what's going on than to feed you lines of BS, and then it's like I can sit there and know that what I just heard is not relevant to anything, and you just almost feel stupid for having listened to it. That was not the case with Sonny Gray saying, yeah, I'll be honest with you, couldn't grip the ball. Yeah, that was why I was throwing the changeup more. That grip is a little bit more conducive. Whatever he says, it's real. It's what actually went on. But I feel like fans, jump to that, well, he's making an excuse rather than, he's just explaining what's going on. But there's enough angst about it because the guy's making $35 million next year and he's making $25 this year or whatever it is. And so, people kind of get bogged down in those numbers and you won't be able to say a word. But, man, I tell you what, I believed it, every word from him, because when I bowl, I've dealt with this my whole life and bowling moderately competitively. I cannot grip the damn ball. And when I finish like 3 games of bowling league, I will go and it sounds disgusting, but I'll go wash my hands. And it's that combination of like rosin and sweat basically that builds up on your hand when you're doing that, because after you throw the bowling ball, you go to the rosin ball once again to try to get it dry so you can throw it the next time. And it's like once I'm thinking about it, your hand starts to sweat. I'm talking right now, and it's probably going to start happening. Hand's pretty dry right now. But I can't explain it. That's just something that I've dealt with. So when Sonny Gray's talking about having that happen to him in a feels-like temperature of 100 degrees in a stadium setting trying to grip a baseball where, probably some weeks the seams are tighter and then MLB gives you these other balls and the balls are different now, it can't be easy. And so, yes, the Marlins pitcher, as somebody pointed out to me on Twitter, well, he wasn't complaining about the heat. Totally fine. Everybody's different, though, and, Sonny was telling the truth. So take it for what you will. He had some trouble with the heat. They're in the dog days of summer, and like I said, you don't have to doubt for a moment that he's giving you straight talk when it comes to what was going on with him tonight. So let me know. Sound off in the comments. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people saying he's making an excuse. And, look, I'm not saying he pitched great, and I'm not saying he's pitched well in the month of July. But, by the way, it was something that Ollie mentioned is that, yeah, his July ERA has been, his numbers in July haven't been as good, and ultimately he'll turn it around. That was the commentary that Ollie had made. And so here, I'll play you this last quote from Sonny before we go quickly down on the farm, because we've got more J.J. Weatherholt to tell you about. Katie Wu asked this question of Sonny toward the end, and he kind of invoked it once more, planning to have that turnaround be right around the corner.
You starts. I know you're not going to explicitly go into detail on what you're working on, but you mentioned trying to take over some things and make some changes. Do you feel like you're getting closer to where you want to be with that?
I think so. I think so. I just need this weather to break, and I'll be fine.
So, I mean, again, you can read that as he's making an excuse, but I don't think he's making it up. And his numbers over his career back it up. A 4.17 career ERA in July, and that was coming into today. And so probably that gets a little bit worse, even though it's a career number, and one game isn't going to change it drastically, especially one game where, the ERA for the game was probably right around 5 or whatever it is, 5 innings, 3 runs. So nothing crazy there by any stretch of the imagination. But that's the worst ERA over a month of all the months that you could be pitching in Major League Baseball for Sonny Gray. For his career, ERA in the month of July, 4.17 coming into today. And I think September/October was another month in which he's got slightly above 4 for the ERA for whatever reason, but in every other month, his ERA is much lower. I'll find the stat for you. In April, March, he's got a 3.04. In May, it's a 3.65. In June, it's a 3.68. July is where it gets the hottest. You probably have the most games where you're dealing with the sweat and all that good stuff going on with the 100-degree heat, 4.17. But then August had his best month. I mean, it's hard to phrase this. Had his best month. I'm talking about over the course of his whole career. Every time August rolls around, he gets down to brass tacks. 2.81 ERA across the month of August in his major league career, 355 innings worth. And then September or October, if there's some games, regular season games that bleed into October, it's a 4.07. But August has been historically his best month, and the next start he'll make will come in the month of August. So Cardinals fans, let me know in the comments below your thoughts on Sonny Gray and his thoughts on dealing with the St. Louis Heat. But before we get out of here, we do want to make sure to tell you the latest and greatest in the world of J.J. Weatherholt as we go down on the farm.
It's time to go down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh?
So it was kind of funny tonight. The Cardinals always, I guess, on the television broadcast have their difference maker of the game. It's like a sponsored segment that they, make sure to always pick a guy who's been the biggest difference maker. But if you watch the Cardinals tonight, there really wasn't one. And so what did FanDuel Sports Midwest do? They pivoted. They pivoted to the minor leagues. And J.J. Weatherholt, who led off the Memphis Redbirds contest this evening against Norfolk, the Tides, with a home run. And so they made, I think it's the BJC Health or whatever it is, difference maker of the game. On the big league broadcast, they named J.J. Weatherholt as that, as he had a nice night for Memphis out there in Norfolk. 2 for 5 with the home run, and it was his 5th of the Memphis campaign. Again, he's been there for however many weeks now. It's more recent that he's been called up, but he's still producing an 1172 OPS after a 2 for 5 day with a homer and 3 RBIs in this game. Michael Ciani also hitting a home run, his 7th of the season as a Memphis Redbird. But Weatherholt just keeps on trucking, and Memphis got the 10-4 victory in that contest. And we can take it down to Springfield to talk about the AA Cardinals before we get out of here. It was a home game, home series for them against Arkansas this week. The Travelers, Springfield, taking it 3-2 in a tight, well-pitched contest down there in AA for the Cardinals. You saw Winquist start this game, 5 2/3, gave up 2 runs, 1 earned. And he's got an 0.90 ERA. I believe he's one of the more recent call-ups, if I'm not mistaken, to the AA level. Cade Winquist is 25 years old, and we have seen him indeed at a couple of levels this year. Pitched to a 4.5 ERA in Peoria at high A, which is a little bit interesting that he comes right up here to AA and is throwing the ball really well. Through 10 innings, he has allowed just the 1 earned run. So good stuff there as both the higher levels of the minors for the Cardinal organization winners tonight. St. Louis, unfortunately, did not get the win, and we will continue to look for trade deadline stuff. Like the Matz thing was interesting tonight. There was nothing really other than that came of this game in terms of the rumblings. Brenden Donovan was out of the lineup today, but I think pretty standard, similar to Arenado yesterday. We thought, is Arenado going to be, is he being traded? Is that why he's not in the lineup? Well, no, just a standard off day. And he was back in the lineup tonight, and Donovan, I assume, will be back in the lineup for the Cardinals on Wednesday as they will try to win that series over the Miami Marlins after dropping Game 2 tonight 5-0. But that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in and listening, and we'll talk to you next time on b-schaeff Daily. Peace.